your head. Do it in your head. Thank you. And this is resuming the livestock movement bylaw, the deliberations, which we had to adjourn momentarily for another meeting. I think Councillor Eyre was asking a question about extensions, and I'm wondering what, I'm sorry, but your question wasn't clear. Can you just refresh us?
No, yeah, because it hadn't been noted as an issue in the deliberations, but I've gone back and I note the submission is aligned with what the extension suggestions in the bylaw. So apologies for that. I do see there's no discrepancy there at all.
Indeed not. And the other one was stock underpasses, I think, was a topic raised by Councillor Church. And just before we get onto that, Ms. Bevan, who does not appear to be on this. So, Matt, can you make sure that notes are taken that the council's contribution to costs in terms of stock underpasses come from the Waka Kotahi funding assistance, not from the council coffers. Thank you. So, Councillor Church, what was your question on stock underpasses?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just want clarity because we've got the schedule, and I just note that we've had one verbal submission around that schedule, and two, one about affordability, which was from one of the submitters around the expense of an underpass, and also another one around the cost and the subsidy. So I just raising it as a concern around if council deems for safety reasons, and that's just what a lot of this bylaw is around, at whatever the road total vehicles on that road, should we not be looking at seriously supporting that with a subsidy? So if there's a road of 300 cars and we deem it to be a safety issue, because that would be one of the prime reasons to put the underpass in such a low usage road, yet those farmers in that particular area wouldn't get any subsidy. So, and three submitters have talked about the subsidy and I guess that support. So I really wanted to clarify where we actually stood, or did we need some more thinking about it?
And important to note, as I did just before Ms. Bevan joined us, that the subsidy is from Waka Kotahi. Councillor Smith.
Just on that point, Madam Chair, I think the discussion that Councillor Church is seeking is really an LTP discussion based around the known subsidies at the time. So I think because the primary benefit is the safety of the cattle and to some extent the road users, whether it's probably less than the 80-20 and closer to 50-50. But the reality is we haven't budgeted for, in this LTP, the provision of funding to do that, and we rely on the Waka Kotahi NZTA subsidy. So I think we are stuck with that in the interim, and I would recommend that we don't deviate from that in the interim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just have more clarity on that, please? I guess if we're not going to do this policy, presume it could be 5 years, could be even 10. So, I'm aware of it. That's a commitment of spending money in the LTP that we can't actually even discuss with the Ford Council. But if this policy is not picking up the policy objectives of the road user safety, as well as livestock, and to minimise and to eliminate unsafe crossings, because we've already agreed to the changing of the words of 1.5 of the movement policy of saying we want to eliminate unsafe stock crossings in the district. So it could be that we deem in the future that a particular crossing, with low vehicle count needs to be an underpass, and yet they won't have the same satisfaction or support that we have. So I know we can't commit LTP, but if there was one over the 500, we are actually supporting those farms or those crossings or those unsafe ones. So my question is, what's the difference between a safety hazards or issues under 500 vehicles as opposed to over, when the affordability issues and concerns are being brought up?
I don't have an answer for that, but Mr. Bayer, do you? Or was it something that was raised through the working group?
Well, the only comment, and I just discussed it with Hannah, is that you get to a stage, depending on the number of vehicle movements, and it's currently set at 500, where the public benefit diminishes quite dramatically, and it ends up being private benefit. And that's the reason why there's got to be some cutoff somewhere, whether subsidy or not subsidy. You could argue that the 500 is not right, but that's, I guess, the way that it's cast at the moment. And it does relate to that private versus public benefit. And that's what we always do when we're looking at subsidising things, is what is the public benefit? What is the benefit there? So, yeah.
Right. And have we got a number around that? And I know, Councillor Smith, like you've talked a lot with the Federated Farmers and things, because one of the comments around this underpasses has come from the Federated Farmers. And so just what's the scale of, I guess, our liability for these underpasses, for that this policy is actually going to put in place?
Through the chair, Jan, maybe, I don't know, but what I can say is in the 3 years that I've been at council, I haven't seen one stock underpass being built. Gareth tells me he's been here longer than I have, I think maybe 4 years or thereabouts, and he's only seen one built during that time. And there most definitely has been no discussions with farmers in the last 3 years saying, I would like to do this or I would like to do that. So I don't see a lot of pressure coming on us in the short term for sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought that the point raised by Rosemary Costa was on having no underpasses for those with the under 500 vehicle movements. I felt that was what she was wanting looked at.
Councillor Smith, did you have a comment on that?
Sorry, I was muted. She did want any road, be it sealed or unsealed, under 500. So Rosemary's situation is possibly unique insofar as she lives in a road that is basically a square that goes right around the farm, and they farm across the road. And she has, her and her husband have 3 crossings on that section of road, and a school bus and other neighbours. So 3 crossings. Yeah, it's difficult. And as we said during the discussions with the Federated Farmers Group, this bylaw was not about an individual. This was about the majority of people, and there will always be exceptions, and case by case, and that's where staff had to be pragmatic. And we believe that this has been done that way for several years now. So to do something for one person is not necessarily a good thing in my view. And I'm not trying to single Rosemary out at all, but her situation is a little unique. And what she's got in place there appears to be working, unless, because staff haven't told me otherwise. So I'm probably not helping the discussion, but I really can't help you anymore.
No, I take your point there, Councillor Eyre.
Okay, so in light of that information from Councillor Smith, do staff, just a bit of clarity, do staff have discretion about requirements for underpasses on those roads or not? Are they able to say that in this circumstance?
Sorry, Hannah, Ms. Bevan, you may have an answer there.
Yes, so to a certain degree, as the bylaw is drafted, there is some discretion for staff. So in clause 8.4, it talks about council may issue a permit where the proposed crossing location does not meet the specified criteria, and that refers to the matrix as one of those specified criteria. And then it lists different things for council to consider when or if issuing a permit. So, and that's listed from 8.4A to C. But Ross, you might have additional comments on that.
No, I think that pretty clearly reflects it.
I think what we're seeing in this is that we're trying to keep it simple, we're trying to keep it common sense, and from as past performance shows, staff are using their discretion to come up with solutions that are achievable and affordable. And I think we've also made some movement there with in terms of the signage, which was an issue that bothered a few farmers. So, Ms. Bevan, is your hand still up, or is it just accidentally up, or are you waving?
Sorry, I just wanted to note in 8.4b, it does talk about one of the considerations is the proposed crossing is located in the Aka Aka drainage district with the installation of underpasses impractical or expensive.
Yeah.
So that is one of the considerations.
And has always been so, to my understanding. I certainly remember that from a long time back.
So maybe I can help you again with a bit of history here. So that is one that's always been on a too hard basket up in Aka district, because what you're trying to do in some of those drains is breach a canal, not a drain. Yes. So I think where that has arisen, there was the ability for discretion around how they operate, which didn't necessarily mean they had to put an underpass in. So because it just practically you couldn't do it practically. Well, you could, but how long's a piece of string sort of thing? So there was in the original policy provision that actually recognised those issues up there in the Arc drainage area.
And I remember very extensive discussions on that too. Councillor Church.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what we're saying is we don't have any allocation at the moment in our LTP for underpass subsidies for anyone in a budget.
Right.
I don't know the answer to that.
That's correct.
Right, there you have the answer.
So yeah, I guess it's that, that simplicity, and it would be for the future LTP, obviously, and council can't commit to funds they don't have for that until those LTPs. But if we have 5 applications, for example, next week, we're still going to limit the ones that are under 500 vehicles, just to put a line in the sand, rather than saying, yes, we think it's important that if it's deemed important to have a subsidy for all, or that ones under 500, as Councillor Henderson said, under 500 vehicle movements, they shouldn't even be needing an underpass. Because I feel like the policy, we're a bit confused on having a coin on both sides of the fence.
Look, I think your question has already been answered, Councillor Church.
I'm just thinking that the policy is a bit both-sided, so I'm just trying to understand clearly which side we're more interested in.
Mr. Bayer, do you want to answer that one again, please?
Yes, so in the current LTP, there is no funds from our council for subsidy for underpasses, right? That is not to say that we cannot consider in a council meeting or through council an application or applications that we might have for subsidy in the future. So those things don't necessarily conflict, if you like. And the bylaw does talk about the 25% subsidy and does talk about cut-offs, right? So the information is there. No doors will be closed. But right now there is no funds in the LTP allocated specifically for this task.
So at council's discretion.
As Mr. Bayer has said a couple of times. Councillor Eyre.
Look, I just want to support Councillor Church's commentary, really. I think she's quite right. If we haven't actually got funding for it in the LTP, then should it just not be removed to have a requirement for an underpass on those roads? Yeah. If we can't support it, with any subsidy.
Councillor
how many, as a matter of interest, how many roads in our district under 500 vehicles per day are required to have underpasses? Can anyone answer that?
There's none on the horizon, is there, Ross?
No.
Well, I don't. Through the chair, I don't know the answer to that. I would obviously have to go and do some research, but I guess it does come back to what I said before. There's been no discussions from anybody in the farming community about underpasses in the 3 years that I've been here.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, would you like to have the last word on this, please, before we go to the recommendation?
2 points. I think that Councillor Church and Councillor Eyre are missing the point. There is a subsidy available currently through NZTA, and our subsidy has always been on the basis that that is available, and we source that and pass it on. We're a conduit from NZTA to the permit holder or the landowner. That should not be removed from the policy or the bylaw. Council has chosen not to fund any additional money in the currently. Having talked to Dines Fulton, who came on council with one of these as his platform probably 20 years ago now, Dines was telling me that he thought most of the problem issues had been dealt with, and there really was only change in farming, amalgamations, growing each side of the road, etc., that may come up, and so therefore there'll be very few going forward. Excuse me. So I think firstly, the issue of the subsidy is a non-event because I can only provide it under the current our policy if it's available from NZTA. If it's not, it's not there. And then, yeah, so I've covered it. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I'm going to move now to the recommendation on page 44 and ask for a mover and seconder on that. This is noting that this is brought to the Policy and Regulatory Committee on the 3rd of May to recommend for adoption by the Council on the 23rd of May. So do I have a mover, please, for that? Councillor Smith and Councillor Patterson. Sorry, I thought Mr. Bayer was moving that for a second. Councillor Smith and Councillor Patterson, all in favour, please raise a hand. Thank you. And against?
It's subject to the amendments, obviously, yeah.
Of course, yes, and we will see those. So please check, make sure you check, sorry, carried. Please make sure you check the amendments that you have a particular interest in. So that brings us to the end of the hearing. Once again, thank you to Ms. Bevan. I think she's had an exceptional workload over the past, well, quite the past few months, and rather unfortunate to have 2 hearings a week apart. So thank you for your help, and it really doesn't go unnoticed what you're doing. We appreciate it, and we do know that you're pulling your hair out in the middle of the night and all this sort of thing. So thank you so much for doing that. Thank you, Mr. Bayer, for also attending with your wise words, and thank you everybody for your participation and attendance. And I declare the hearing and deliberations closed. Thank you.